Hey guys, Montel Williams here. Did you know that you could save 20% on your medical cannabis card today? That's right. With LeafWell, you can connect with a licensed healthcare provider through their easy to use telehealth platform. Whether you're managing chronic pain, anxiety, or just exploring cannabis for health reasons, LeafWell makes it quick, simple, and stress free. And here's the best part. When you head to leafwell.com/Montel, you'll get an exclusive 20% discount off your medical cannabis card. Why wait? Join over 1 million satisfied users who trust LeafWell with their cannabis care. So that's right. All you got to do is go to leafwell.com/Montel and get started today and save 20%. Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Be Blunt, the podcast where we keep it real about cannabis and its evolving landscape. I'm your host, Montel Williams, and today we've got a truly special episode packed with eye-opening insights. And if you're curious about how cannabis is becoming a game changer in the medical community, reducing chronic pain, even tackling anxiety, you're going to want to buckle up and stay tuned for this one. I'm beyond thrilled to have and welcome Dr. Ethan Russo, a neurologist, pharmacology researcher, and one of the most respected names in cannabis research. Dr. Russo's resume reads like a guidebook to the pioneering work in medical cannabis. He's the CEO of Credo Science, a creator of the Foundations of Cannabis Therapeutics course, and a longtime advocate for educating people about science behind cannabis. Dr. Russo, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, sir. And, I just barely scratched at your resume, but you spent decades researching medical cannabis and medical applications of cannabis. Can you break it down for us a little bit and tell our listeners what it's about cannabis and the cannabinoid system that makes it such a powerful tool in healing? But before you answer that question, tell me a little bit more about your background, where you're from, and if you want, just go ahead and list that education and background that you have, because I want people to understand how powerful, an emissary you have been for the cannabis community.
Sure, thanks.
Yes, sir.
So, I grew up in Massachusetts, but after college, I migrated west with a detour 1 year in France in medical school before I completed medical school at the University of Massachusetts. Then I really headed west for good, doing pediatrics in Phoenix, Arizona, and then neurology and pediatric neurology at the University of Washington. By then it was 1983, and I was off to practice neurology for the next 20 years in Missoula, Montana. But along the way, I had a little bit of a crisis of confidence, not in myself, but in what conventional medicine could really offer to my patients. So I returned to a childhood interest in medicinal plants. That led to a sabbatical in the rainforest in Peru. But when I came back, it was 1996. That was the year that Prop 215 in California really was the catalyst to medicinal cannabis usage that spread around the United States and the world. So when I came back, I quickly got embroiled in the whole cannabis controversy and was very much taken with the complexity and beauty of the science behind cannabis and what we call the endocannabinoid system. So what that is the major homeostatic regulator of our physiology. Let's put that in lay terms. That means that this is the master that regulates how all our functions work in the body. And it neatly explains why cannabis is so versatile in treating so many different conditions. So subsequently in doing this, I started publishing about cannabis as a medicinal. That caught the notice of Jeffrey Guy, the founder of GW Pharmaceuticals, a British company which had a license from the Home Office to develop pharmaceutical cannabis preparations. So for several years, I was in practice, I was consulting, I was publishing, and then for the next 11 years, beginning in 2003, I was working full-time with GW Pharmaceuticals in the development programs for the only two cannabis-based pharmaceuticals Sativex and Epidiolex. Sativex is approved in 30 countries for spasticity and multiple sclerosis, and Epidiolex is actually approved in the US and numerous countries for the treatment of severe epilepsy syndromes. As you mentioned, the last 5 years now, I've had my own company, Credo Science, which is dedicated to making cannabis safer and better. So that might be a little more than you wanted, but that's
No,
synopsis.
That's that's exactly what I wanted, because I wanted people to understand, the breadth and of your knowledge and your ability to be able to explain things. Let's go back for a second to endocannabinoid system explanation, because a lot of our viewers have heard about it, but they don't really kind of understand it. I mean, one of the things I like to make sure people understand is that right now, so far, we only know of two of the endocannabinoids that we produce ourselves in our own body. But had you never used cannabis before in your life, you actually produce a cannabinoid naturally in our body, anandamide, and the other ones with 2-AG. Explain what they are and what they do in actually, when you said cellular homeostasis, I like to say to people, well, if you kind of think about that Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, just right. That's what cannabis does in helping our endocannabinoids help our body hit that just right mark. Explain a little bit about that to people.
Sure, we've explained it nicely, but if we look at the hardcore activity in the brain, what anandamide and 2-AG will do is tamp down excesses in the system. So let's look at a neurotransmitter, chemical messenger in the brain called glutamate. So it's stimulatory. What anandamide and 2-AG will do is tamp down its release. So if we've got too much activity in the system, it'll bring it back down into balance. And that's important. If we look at
And to maybe explain the fact that those
sure,
are two chemicals, the only two chemicals in our body, in our entire system, that actually work in a retrograde way, right? I mean, like, let's say you hit you stub your toe really bad walking down a hallway, boom, you hit it, and you don't break it, but you injured it to the point that your body starts releasing all the chemicals down to it to fight inflammation and those things. It's anandamide that sends a signal back up to your brain that says, okay, slow down. We don't need any more, right?
right. Well, that again explains the phenomenon of the stub toe. Hurts terribly, briefly, but provided it's not broken and there isn't major damage, often the thing will just fade away over the next few minutes. And that's part of the endocannabinoid system at work. It's basically saying, if I can anthropomorphize, that, hey, got the signal. We don't want to do that again. Don't want to stub the toe again, but there's no major damage. So let's tamp down the pain so that you can proceed and walk to your destination.
That's crazy. Now, you've been at the forefront of some pretty incredible discoveries in this field. Let's talk a little bit about your work with, let's say, CBG and some of the other minor cannabinoids, because a lot of people are aware of, THC and CBD, but they aren't aware of CBG, CBN, CBC. I mean, it goes on. And a lot of people aren't even aware of like all the acid versions of every single one of these. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, CBG, I like to call the mother of all cannabinoids because it's first in the biosynthetic pathway. So it comes before CBD and THC. Normally, though, the plant moves onward from it. But back more than 20 years ago, GW had developed plants that don't have the equipment to go beyond CBG. And this was done without genetic modification. It was just good old selective breeding. Um, and the company had supported a lot of basic research about what CBG does. And it turns out to be a really amazing cannabinoid. First, it's not intoxicating, doesn't produce a high the way THC does, but it has very prominent anti inflammatory effects and works on a number of different systems. I had the occasion under legal conditions to try CBG way back when, and found that it had a remarkable ability to reduce anxiety, to which I'm prone. Um, and without being sedating, no hangover, no dependency or anything else. Unfortunately, the company wasn't in a position to really develop it because they were working on these other things. Subsequently, CBG has become more available in the last several years, particularly in the Pacific Northwest where I live. And so gradually, people have had the same experience of using this and saying, hey, does a great job on anxiety. Plus, in a survey study we did published a few years back, we had 127 people using CBG predominant preparations, some only CBG, and they were reporting benefits on 30 different medical conditions, including chronic pain, insomnia, you name it. Not one of the respondents thought that their conventional medicine worked better than CBG. So we wanted to go on from there. So with Kerry Cutler at Washington State University, we did a study where people took CBG or placebo, and they were recorded on Zoom and subjected to tests that would make them anxious. And what we found was 20 milligrams of CBG very nicely and statistically significantly reduced anxiety, but without any impairment. In fact, on one of the memory tests, they actually scored better than the people that weren't on anything. Um, so this is a remarkable substance, and
And it's one of the, like you had said, it's one of the first, I guess, when, yeah, I know a little bit about some of the science, that the fact that for the first 6 weeks of a plant growing, CBG is the predominant cannabinoid that can be found. And then after that, it starts to, I use the term loosely, turn into CBD, THC, CBDA, CBD, THCA, and it kind of goes down. I mean, in most fully grown plants, you'll find like 0.001 or a little bit better amount of CBG. And I literally had some products in the marketplace, some vapes in the marketplace that I literally utilize CBG in as one of the component parts. I mix CBG, THC, CBD, and CBC together to elicit, or still CBN together to elicit a response for a sleep product.
sure. Well, what we're finding is, the really the emphasis for most of the last several decades has been on increasing that THC amount. And THC is great and necessary for certain conditions. You have to have THC in a cannabis preparation to be effective for post-traumatic stress treatment, for example. But we've had a really recent develop with CBG, cannabigerol, I'd love to talk about, and that's in the area of pain. So we have on top of our spinal cords things called dorsal root ganglia, and these are where the sensory nerves come into the nervous system. There is a channel there, sodium channel called NaV 1.8. And in this recent study that was just published a couple of weeks ago, it was shown that CBG very actively works on this receptor and can reduce pain that begins in the periphery, out in the body, and without any effect in the brain. So, in other words, this could be one of the holy grails we've been looking for, something that treats pain without having side effects in the brain. So this is really exciting, and it supports what we've been hearing from patients about, gee, this is really doing a job on my chronic pain condition. We didn't always understand all the mechanisms, but this is an additional one that's recently come to light.
And does that have something to do? I know. Were you involved in the recent study that just took place in Europe that validated the fact that cannabinoids work so well for neuropathy and other pains associated with cancer?
No, I wasn't, but it would be similar to other studies in which I was involved.
And though I'm starting to see in most of the dispensaries and places around the country that do provide medical cannabis, there has been a greater acceptance of the minor cannabinoids. But do you think that we need to do more of that?
Oh, absolutely. We haven't even mentioned yet tetrahydrocannabivarin, THCV. Um, That one actually reduces appetite. It can be very helpful in the metabolic syndrome, obesity, and diabetes. And then cannabichromene really gets very little attention. The reason
CBC.
being,
Yes.
there's usually very little of it in commercial cannabis preparations because it's made from a recessive gene, unlike the dominant genes that lead to THC and CBD production. But cannabichromene is turning out to have, again, a lot of benefits on inflammatory conditions. There is also evidence that it can help neurogenesis. Neurogenesis is the creation of new brain cells, something that we thought couldn't happen previously. So, may have great application after head injury or in degenerative diseases of the brain. So this is a very exciting area that really hasn't gotten the attention it deserves.
Have you written a book that talking about some of the breakthroughs in the minor cannabinoids, or where can people go to get more information like that? Because education to me is the
Sure.
most important part of this.
Well, I have been the writer or editor of 7 books, but they're all old at this point. I do have a personal webpage, ethanrusso.org, at the library tab, and there's some 70 articles of mine that are available there free to people because it is my personal website and it doesn't violate any copyright laws. So many of the things we've been discussing would be available there if people wish to dig in.
Well, from my perspective, and I don't know if it's from yours, but one of the things that I've been talking about now for 24 years is the fact that education is probably the most important aspect of anything that involves cannabis. Um, we as an industry, I think, have done ourselves a disservice by not continuing down the path of B2C education rather than focusing on B2B education. I mean, you go to a lot of these conventions and different forums around the country, and you walk in, and they just seem to be nothing more than a big ballroom full of new extraction equipment or new ways to sell and administer, but don't do as much in educating the masses so they understand what it is that they're actually putting in their bodies.
Sure, I wouldn't disagree.
Okay. Do you plan on writing or I know you just said your personal website, which I'm made a note of, but do you plan on writing any books or being involved in getting some more of this information out there so that
Right.
people becomes more aware?
Probably not on the books. We've been devoting our attention to a new course offering. We're just completing in the next week, this being March 2025.
And that'll be
So,
part of this, what, your Foundations of Cannabis Therapeutics course?
right, that course is shorter. It's about 10 hours. This is a certification in advanced cannabis pharmacology and therapeutics. That'll be a 40-hour platform, really designed for physicians or other people in a position to recommend cannabis to patients and really get them up to speed. So it's sort of the distillation, I hope, of everything I've learned over the last 29 years. And that'll be available very soon from MM411 is the name of the educational platform.
And you're also hosting webinars on that platform?
Yes, for example, this week we're doing one on cannabis prohibition and scheduling. Um, so a little less science at trying to just document the political situation that's kept this plant from the kind of access that patients really need.
Since you brought it up, and let's take a little journey down that path of politics in a sense. I mean, there's so many people who are thinking that this whole idea of rescheduling is going to be the great panacea for cannabis, but I have been a believer that we do that. All we do is open up a Pandora's box for the next 20 years of prohibition.
Right, I agree. It's going to have some cosmetic benefits if it happens at all, and I'm really skeptical of that.
I am too.
It might make it easier to get a bank account and have dispensaries not have to deal in cash and become targets for theft, which is criminal in itself. Um, I've been an advocate of descheduling so that cannabis can be legalized and regulated somewhat akin to the way alcohol and tobacco are, and they are obviously much more dangerous substances.
Absolutely. And you just said, I mean, if you had a crystal ball, first off, I don't think the right people are in the conversations to begin with, so that politicians can even move forward. People like yourself aren't invited to those kind of conversations. They always pick the people who, are the naysayers that have been around for a long time, beating the same stupid drum of, this is a gateway drug. And, how do we impress upon our politicians that it needs to be more people like you sitting at the table?
It's very difficult. I'm afraid that politicians get converted to understanding the utility of cannabis medicinally only when it affects them or a family member. Like they get cancer, or someone in their family gets cancer, and they see the miraculous benefits that can accrue from its use in reducing pain, reducing nausea, allowing them to sleep, allowing them to be present, even if they have a terminal condition. Um, and it it seems like everyone is converted to the understanding after they've left office.
Right, right. And the part of that's because they're paid too much to make sure they can continue to fight this battle. I mean, your company, Creta Science, has made it a mission to make cannabis safer and better. Tell us a little bit about it. Tell our listeners a little bit more about the company.
Sure. So that was the working credo, excuse the expression, of the
Hmm.
company. And uh, we have different silos of activity. We have some technologies of our own. For example, we developed a diagnostic screening test for cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome based on genetics. Additionally, we're doing a great deal of formulation work for three pharmaceutical companies developing cannabis based medicines and also for the over the counter market. And then another of the silos is the educational platform that we discussed. So we have our hands in a lot of different areas related to cannabis. And it's not just, we're trying to be honest about the dangers, such as cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, but especially on the therapeutic aspects.
Absolutely. And could you give out some stats, like where can people go to get more information about your company? Is there a
Sure.
website?
Pretty simple there. Credo, CREDO dash science.com. And again, for access to articles, it would be ethanrusso.org. If people are interested in cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, it is what dash is dash chs.com.
Okay. And let's go back and talk a little bit more about the endocannabinoid system. Once again, I'm sorry because I got you. I wanted to pick your brain as much as you can. I mean, talk a little bit about the conditions and diseases that are most affected by that.
Well, we're starting the brain. The endocannabinoid system is heavily involved in modulation of pain and emotion. Pain is, looking at surveys, is 70% of the folks that use cannabis medicinally. And Lord knows we need better treatments there that aren't going to produce addiction or overdose potential. Um, and again, that's why I'm so excited about this recent develop with cannabigerol in treating peripherally based pain. But additionally, there's the whole forgotten area of psychiatry, treating anxiety, treating intractable depression, treating post traumatic stress. And although the the research has been tough to get and will continue to be given politics. There's tremendous promise there in the potential of cannabis based medicine properly constituted to treat a lot of these conditions.
Well, Dr. Russo, do you think the majority or the larger percentage of the medical community is starting to accept the fact that cannabis is real? I mean, then the research that's been done on it is real.
Well, it's a little better than it was. For better or worse, most physicians are very conservative, and many will only accept the idea of a medicine if it's been FDA approved, meaning that it's proven that it works, it's safe, and it's consistent over time. So most physicians are not going to be comfortable with their patient going to a dispensary and getting some preparation that they don't understand. And this is certainly one of the reasons that we've been so actively engaged in education about therapeutic aspects of cannabis and the endocannabinoid system. It really is necessary to understand the ECS to realize the potential that cannabis has as a therapeutic
But,
agent.
you know, what gets me with that though is that we've known about this, and doctors have known about this and fought this for now almost 40 years. I mean, when Raphael Mechoulam first discovered this back in the 80s, and we were funding this with NIDA research dollars. We were funding this. So, and our own government wrote its own patent application, and in its abstract said exactly what they thought cannabis was doing back as early as 2002. It's like, I mean, what do you got to do? You got to take a baseball bat and start beating some of these people over the head?
Well, this is what happens, unfortunately. For better or worse, the people that make the rules know the least about this. So I think you've alluded to this previously. It would be better if physicians and scientists had a seat at the table with respect to these kinds of decisions about scheduling and where the science dollars go, which are going to be very sparse, it appears, in the near term.
So, I mean, Doc, I mean, I know you've said that maybe the rest of the medical community is starting to at least embrace the fact that there's some medical efficacy here. Do you think that that's going to change over the next few years? More and more people starting to embrace the idea that, yes, there's something real here.
Well, we always hope so, but a lot of this would relate to the amount of support there is for research. And it seems like the National Institutes of Health, which is the major supporter of biomedical research, is in a state of turmoil right now. So it then falls to private companies to pick that up. But in the cannabis space, very few of them are making money or dedicate much of their income to research. Then it would fall to physicians and other caregivers to educate themselves. And this is one reason we put such a premium on offering educational content to people who are interested in cannabis therapeutics.
I mean, I don't know what you feel about him personally, but, with Dr. Oz getting ready to take over CMS, I did multiple shows with him about the viability of cannabis. And he was probably one of the first doctors on television to actually embrace cannabis because he realized that there was some legitimacy here when he started looking into the research being done back then by like NYU and around the world, starting to recognize that, GW, what your work was happening through GW Pharmaceuticals, that there was some legitimacy here. I mean, I would want, have you reached out to him to try to figure out how you can get in a conversation? I know I have a side way into him. I'd love to take you along with me so that maybe we can have a conversation with him that will turn into a conversation with Elon Musk. And we have both sides of the ears of the president to listen to somebody who are clearly cannabis supporters.
Right. Well, I have been involved with a small group that has tried to approach the administration with a white paper. So far, no activity. But we have to keep in mind who the major players are. And right now, the Attorney General, the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader all have a history of being rabid prohibitionists. So I have to be honest that I think it's very unlikely there's going to be a lot of movement in this
And
area.
and they're rabid prohibitionists because, again, I believe it's just because of their lack of knowledge. They have gone down one path that has been based on what we know isn't even science, not even pseudoscience, based on hatred and 70 years of prejudicial feelings towards cannabis based on nothing of truth. I mean, there's got to be a way around these guys. I mean, what would your strategy be to see how we can? I mean, I think one of the biggest ways to do this is kind of taking a little note out of the pharmaceutical industry's playbook, and that is forcing the constituents, the consumer, into forcing the doctors to say we need to do something. That's the reason why we see, so many commercials for pharmaceutical, drugs on a television every 5 minutes to convince the consumer to go into the doctor and ask for something that then they can make available. So, I mean, how do we convince more people like in your position and more companies out here that are part of the cannabis industry to understand that the most vital thing we could do right now is to educate the masses?
Well, I agree, but it's going to happen one doctor at a or one politician at a time, and it all revolves around money. Medicine is in really a bit of a crisis. I would mention my last physical. I was not touched. I was talked to and had some blood drawn, but modern medicine is not amenable to the kinds of conversations that are necessary in cannabis based treatment. It takes time, it takes explanation, it takes actually spending time with the patient. And you can't do that in medicine these days and make a living out of it when people are scheduled every 10 or 15 minutes.
Right.
That wasn't the way I practiced when I was in neurology practice. Um, and I didn't make a lot of money at it because I spent a lot of time.
Right. I agree with you with that because I know I re- I have a couple of doctor's appointments that are coming up, and I was scheduling my annual physical and scheduling my wife's on the same day, and noticed that there was a half hour for mine and a half hour for hers. I'm going, well, how does he know it's going to take a half hour to see me? But based on my visits with that doctor in the last couple of years, I know that he's got a performer. I sit down at the desk and he just asks a couple questions and looks at the medicine I was on and takes my blood pressure and does that 5 minute, physical exam, which really is 5 minutes, and on to the next. So yeah, I mean, I can see now what's it going to take for us to kind of change that trend. I mean, do you see it possibly changing in the next couple of years, or what's it going to take to do that?
Uh, I'm not sure this is going to be the most accelerated schedule for that kind of progress.
Right. Right. And what about technological advances that are happening in science that is starting to improve at least the precision based ideas behind cannabis? I mean, we're starting to see at least I know, I have introduced some products in the marketplace that I think have been what are considered cutting edge. I had 4 different formulations of various formulations for vape pens in the Massachusetts area for a while. I'm trying to reintroduce those in Georgia with also some other new delivery systems that I think can make it a little bit more of a something that patients would like. I mean, I'm working with a company that has created a mucosal spray that allows for it's not an edible, but for something that is ingested that doesn't necessarily have to go through the kidney and the liver because there are nanoparticle that absorption in the mucosal area seems to be quite rapid and the onset rapid. So that's something that helps with people who have had some hesitancy with using oral administrative systems for cannabis, because a lot of people complain about the fact that if I eat an edible, it can take anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes for it to kick in, where this formulation process that we've kind of created, within 5 to 10 minutes, you actually feel it.
Sure. Well, there are lots of different approaches to this, but it's going to require innovation. One bright spot, I think, can be applications of artificial intelligence. Now, I know people are wary of this right now, but certainly it has the potential to accelerate scientific research and development. And hopefully, that will be the case.
Wow. And they could speed up the processes of I guess, diagnosing endocannabinoid system related, right?
Sure.
Huh? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Let me give you an example. We're working with a company now developing a platform. It's a language based system, and it's basically like talking to your doctor. I've been very skeptical about such systems, but I've used this one maybe about 5 hours, and it's never given me a bum steer. The information that imparts is good. The advice that it provides is sound, and it often is. Well, if this is going on, it's probably time to bring in a specialist for this issue. Um, and this would be a way, it's really going to cause advances as well in clinical trials. Now, I am prone to say that COVID was a really terrible development, but it did help in one area, and that was communications like this. With the advent of Zoom, the ability to do business without being there, and the same can apply to clinical trials. We currently are involved in trying to develop a pharmaceutical approach to amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, a terminal neurodegenerative disease. These people get weak and they're not mobile. And we don't want to bring them into the clinic all the time. We want to be able to evaluate them at home and get their feedback about how the medicine is working. And so this is an area where AI can be of great benefit and speed up the process that otherwise is too cumbersome and too expensive.
In some ways, that's being fought by some segments of the medical community. Other areas, they're trying to embrace it. How long or how far away do you think this is from becoming a reality?
Well, I think it's very close. Short of doing an actual physical, you can do most medical things in consultation remotely. For example, if I were talking to a patient the way we're talking right now, by asking the right questions and observing them, perhaps doing a few things that would be part of an exam anyway, like watching them walk, I can probably make a diagnosis and make suggestions about what the next steps are in terms of other diagnostic tests that we need or possible initial treatment interventions. So again, we live in North America. We have weather. Sometimes there's a snowstorm and you can't get to the doctor. This really can be helpful. Um, just as an example, when I started Credo Science, my business partner and I were not together in person for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And yet we did business with numerous companies around the world during that time. So this definitely is possible. And the same kinds of things can apply to doctor-patient interactions.
Gotcha. Well, sir, I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show today. Your work is absolutely inspiring, and I know that our listeners have learned a lot today. And I would love to have you back at some point in time if it's okay. We'll reach out to you and see if we can get you back because I have so many more questions. I could keep you on for another hour, but I let you know we're going to do an hour today. Would you consider coming back?
Absolutely.
I'd love to have you, sir. And for anybody listening and want to get more information, where would they go one more time?
Well, credo-science.com, what-is-chs.com, and ethanrusso.org at the library tab for my journal articles.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope people reach out and start doing that. I know I'm going to be trying to devour your articles as quickly as I can. I got to thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Take care of yourself. Love that family of yours. And for you, make sure you keep tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Yes,
Cheers.
sir. Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.